Well, I think now that you ask me that I'm 5, I think when I was 5, 6 already in a school, and I had to walk to school, was closer to my neighborhood, Ramat Gan. Every time I came home, I was so excited about learning because I had a mission. I had to teach my mother the words. And it's just incredible because I taught her Hebrew. So I became her teacher. I think I became a star pupil because I was just sit and I was just absorbing it. I remember when they started teaching us how to write in Hebrew, there are two, like in English, you can write script only after you know the capital letters. That comes later on. And they had a notebook where you had to write the letters of a certain height. So there were two lines, two blue lines, and you had to write within that confined space. And I was so enamored with it. And then I would show that was the beginning of me becoming a professor. I was teaching my mother, everything I learned, I came home and I was teaching my mother. And she had a notebook and I had a notebook. I had a teacher who was actually a teacher in Germany in a university. And I think he was teaching social studies. So what did he teach us? I don't remember. I think the history of this, history of that, but he would sprinkle in economics and social sciences and whatnot. And I was sitting like that, and I remember to the present day. He one day says, so who remembers what are the 3 most important aspects of a society in modern times? And I said, not you. Okay, anyone else? No, I was only the one with the head of it. And there were 3 words. I said, the 3 words is economics, that's the E. The social fabric, that's the S. And the P, what kind of political environment will it be in? In those days, there were the communists and there were the socialists, and communism was running rage, and there was, what will it be? Capitalism is going to win or communism? He was teaching us actually almost not at the level of an elementary school. That was the last year of my studies, but almost like a high school, at least I would say a university. And my memory is that I learned in school the Hebrew to teach my mother. Of course, there are other subjects, but that was my beginning in getting into the teaching profession. And the whole community was just a street, and there were maybe 60 or 50 or 30, hard for me to gauge right now, not many families, in a small little place which was a synagogue, which in the following years, when they became a little more affluent, 15 years later, when I was already 20, I came from the United States, but say 10 years later, became more affluent, more people came, it began to change. First, there was not even a paved street, and there was mud in the winter. There were about 7,000, but that means the large neighborhood. In our area, it was about 10 families, 20 families, 30 families, one street. A big field between them on one side, then a little kibbutz of some people who started a settlement on the other, and then another street over there. There were streets with small houses. So 30 families, 40 families, 60 families, that's what it was. When I was about 10, 11, they changed a little hut, which was wood, with blocks and a nice home. He had already means, they had the company, they didn't make millions, but they were comfortable. I like to play soccer. Soccer, and I was the biggest hobby I had, if you talk about one hobby, which has a sad story, is stamp collection. I had a collection of stamps from all over the world. And they used to be in cigarette boxes to encourage parents to buy and probably give a stamp here, a stamp there, which was in there. So I used to wait near the places where they would sell cigarettes. And since I was a nice kid, gee whiz, they would give it to me. Yeah. Sir, can I have those? Anyway, because then you would get them. If you had so many, there was an album, and then you could put in the stamps. So I had a big book, which was, I found someplace like people who kept records from orchards, had hardcovers and a lot of pages, which are a lot of writing. I couldn't buy it, and I put stamps in there. Where did I get the stamps? Not too far from the streets where we lived, I told you. There were another street, and then there was also a little collective settlement, a kibbutz. It's called Boyhood, the collective settlement of the young people. And many of them came from Germany and from Austria and from some of the Scandinavian countries. Young women in their 19, 20, 21, some of them even as young as 17, not really, but most of them, I would say in their 20s. Some married and some not married, and young men. Many of them were refugees in a small collective settlement. And you didn't have trucks coming to pick up the garbage, so they would have a place they would drop all the bad stuff in a pit and cover it, but if it was paper, it would pile up. I soon discovered that they have envelopes, and on those envelopes there are stamps, because they got letters from Austria and letters from Germany and letters from America. So I would run quickly, but then when I come, all the other kids would also look in the garbage with all of this is. And I think that was my beginning of thinking creatively. I said, Moshe, if you're going to do what everybody else does, you are never going, they call me Moshe at that time, so I'm not calling myself Moshe. That's a diminutive. You're going to do what everybody else does. You can't compete because they're bigger and stronger than you are. Some of them would push you and they get there a little earlier. So I said, look, if they throw them, I said to myself, into the garbage, they must be someplace before where the people get them. So why don't I go one day for a visit in the kibbutz, go from one woman to another, because I was, women liked me. I was 6, 7 years old and they liked me. Oh, look at this beautiful little kid, touched my head, round head. Anyway, those young women saw me, you see, and I said, what's your name? Moshe. Look how cute he is, how cute he is. And I would ask, I spoke Hebrew already, I was 7 years old, 7.5, 8. Yesh lachem bulim, do you have stamps? What kind of stamps? From the letters that you throw. Oh, you like them? So we'll save them for you. So I didn't tell anyone anything. I would come every day early, and they loved me, they fed me, whatnot, and I got a collection of stamps that was unbelievable. And in 1967, we went to sabbatical, we bought a car, and in the trunk I put a lot of stuff, blankets I bought because I didn't have enough room, 1967. So I put that huge stamp collection in the trunk, and the people who actually handle it and put it on the boat, when they put it on the boat, people know how to actually go in, unlock the trunk, and emptied it completely from all we had there, including that stamp collection. The middle child, Pinchas, was about 2 years older than I am. And he liked to read, and his father started a printing press, and they had a printing press like printing cards for birthdays, and he worked there. And the reason I remember him is because I am a Levite and he's a Kohen, and a Kohen is the priest in the Jewish tradition. The Levite is the assistant priest. I'm the assistant priest. And the priest in the synagogue has to give the priestly benediction to the congregation. He just puts his hands up, and there's a way of saying, I bless you in the name of God. But before he does it, he has to purify himself and almost like emulate what took place in the biblical times in the temple. Wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it. Now you can do the priestly benediction, and you have a certain form of, it's the letter Shin, the beginning letter of the name of God, and you bless. But to get the hands washed and to replicate what happened in the olden days in the temple in Jerusalem, the assistant priest would take a little pitcher of water, and there was a basin, and the priest would just put his hands out, and the assistant priest would have to pour it. And I hated it to the present day when I think about it. Why do I have to serve this son of a gun? I'm smarter than he is. He's an idiot. And I have to cater to him. But then I didn't see them for years, because at the age of 20, when I finished with the army, which will come a little later very briefly, I was for 10 years away. I didn't have the money, and I took time to finish school, all the way to a PhD and being married and whatnot, so and I couldn't go back home. No money. But about 12 years ago, I come home to the apartment, and the neighbor says, you know, Moshe, you had a friend, and we know their children, and I think he just passed away, because I see a sign, an announcement in the newspaper, there's the 7 days of mourning, and they are going to his home to pay respects to him, to the family. I saw him when my mother passed away. I saw him when my father passed away. I saw him, but that was 81 and in 84. But this is, I would say, 2008, maybe 12 years ago. It's a long time after that. 20-some years, and I didn't see him. she tells me that they're sitting Shiva the 7 days of mourning. So I went to the apartment not too far from where we live, and I go up. As I open the door, knock on the door, a woman opens the door, and I introduce myself. She said, "You are the professor, Moshe Rubinstein?" I said, "I'm Moshe Rubinstein." I don't need to introduce myself, professor. I said, "I'm Moshe Rubinstein, and my friend, who am I talking to? I'm his daughter. My father, on his deathbed, said, 'Find Moshe Rubinstein, because I want you to give him something.'" And she gives me a book. It was in Hebrew. A German requiem, how the German Jews became assimilated. Anyway, he asked me to read. He instructed his daughter, who was a social worker, "You have to find Moshe Rubinstein and give it to him." So I came and gave me the book. I read this book in English. I read it in Hebrew. And I was, for months, trying to ask myself, why did he insist that I read this book? And it's a book that tells the story of the Jewish people through one person whose name most of the people in the modern world will know. Everybody heard about the composer Mendelssohn. His music. That Mendelssohn was a descendant of another Mendelssohn who at age 13 came to Berlin in Germany, way back when, and beginning in the mid-18th century, the 1700s, and he goes through where only the cows can go into the city, and he's a little kid who is not even 12 years old because he's a genius. And that's the famous Moses Mendelssohn, whose descendant is the famous composer. He studied Latin, he studied Greek, he read the books of antiquity, he became celebrated, he's known. Moses Mendelssohn is revered all over the Western world because they read his books and his writings. And I constantly wondered, why did he want me to read this book? And I think the answer was that sometimes when you leave the fold, all sorts of things happen to you. So beware, because Mendelssohn ended up having something like a family of, I would say, 60 that I can trace one way or the other. What happened to the family, they started distancing themselves from Judaism. Of all the 60 direct descendants, there is not a single one that remained in the Jewish faith.
So his book was through the eyes.
Yeah, so I puzzled, sometimes there's a message anyway. So that's why I began to say, life is a story. But life is also full of little puzzles and mysteries, and this was one of them.